Alright, how's it going everyone? So today I'll be going over some tips to draw better hair, mostly for anime characters. So there are three things we're going to be covering in this video. First, we're going to cover the skull, and this mostly has to do with how the skull affects the volume of the hair. Secondly, we're going to divide the hair into multiple sections. This makes it easier to keep track of all the different pieces of hair, and it also lets us make sure that the hair originates from the correct spots on the head. And lastly, I know I talk about this a lot, but we're going to have to work on our line work as well, because when we're trying to draw hair, it's extremely important that our arm knows how to make subtle curves. So firstly, the skull. The main reason why this thing is important is because it affects the outline of the head. The bigger the skull, the bigger the head, obviously. And hair is affected by gravity, so in real life, hair usually sticks very close to the skull and it rests on top of it. In anime, hair usually has a little bit more volume than it does in real life, and sometimes it even ignores the laws of gravity, but it always sits on top of the skull. It always originates from the skull, and at the very least, it has to cover every part of the skull. Let's say this is our drawing. Now, what I mean by the hair always has to cover the skull is, if we follow the side of the face and create this character's skull, it has to look somewhat like this. So if this is the outline of the skull, and this is the volume of the hair we're using, we have to be consistent and use that same volume here as well. So we go from this to this. So if we want to draw hair properly, we have to know what the skull looks like. And to start with, we're going to learn the proportions. Thankfully, there aren't that many things we need to learn. All we really have to pay attention to are all the parts where the skull protrudes. So from the front, we have the top right here, as well as the sides right here. From side view, the highest point on the skull is right around there, and luckily for us, that's about halfway the width of the entire skull. The ears are usually located around here. As you can see, the ear canal is right there, so that should give you an idea of where the highest point of the skull is. And then the second thing, like I said, the widest points on the skull, which would be the sides, which are right around here. It's a bit hard to see where this point actually is, but on side view it's right around there, so with the ears being here, it's slightly behind the ears. Not that it matters too much, because whenever we draw the head from a 3/4 view, for example, the widest point of the skull on one side would be here, and then on the other side it'd be somewhere around there, but it actually gets hidden behind the forehead, so it's not too important. So if you're going to try to draw the hair, make sure you always draw the skull first. This also makes it easier to draw the hair from different angles, because now you have something that you can anchor the hair to instead of just having to guess the proportions. Now the second thing I want to talk about is dividing the hair into multiple sections. There's a huge area on the head that the hair grows out of. It doesn't just grow out of a single point. And that's also why the hairline exists. Obviously, I'm sure I don't have to go in depth on this. The parts that we usually divide the hair into are as follows. We have the front part, then the side or middle part, and then the back part. Now, if I draw an actual hairstyle on top of this, it would look somewhat like this. Of course, we have the front part right here. And then, in the case of this hairstyle, the side part would be there, but it kind of doesn't exist because it's being pulled back like that. And then everything here in the back would be the back part of the hairstyle. Another really important thing to keep in mind would be the center line. And this isn't just important for hair, it's important for everything because it allows you to keep things symmetrical. Let's say we have a head like this. I already split it into multiple sections, and then from here, we should add a center line. It should already be there if we're going to draw the features, but we add the center line, and now using this line, we can make sure that our hair shapes are symmetrical. Of course, not every hairstyle is symmetrical, but when we're drawing in perspective, it's a good idea to have that center line and first draw things symmetrically, and then use the center line as an anchor to make things asymmetrical if you want. Here's an example of a drawing where all the hair originates from a single point on the top of the head. So to fix this, you first draw the skull and divide the head into multiple sections, and then when you're drawing the hair, all you have to do is think about which part of the head the hair is originating from. And the last thing I want to talk about would be line work. Now, the problem with hair is that it usually consists of some very subtle curves, and when you're a beginner, your arm is still unable to make all of these curves. So instead of creating some nice shapes with some subtle curves like this, for example, these lines have some very consistent trajectories. You can see that it's constantly curving in this direction. But as a beginner, it's really hard to do this sort of stuff, so instead of doing that, you tend to straighten out some of your lines like this, for example. The result is a line that doesn't follow a consistent trajectory, and thus it doesn't create the impression of hair. I have some other videos on my channel explaining how to get better at controlling your line work, but honestly the best way would be to just create a sheet with circles like this, and then slowly tracing these lines using singular strokes, making sure that you stick as close to the original shape as you can. Also, it's a good idea to use your shoulder for this instead of your wrist. So try to keep your wrist in the same place and move just your shoulder. And eventually, instead of drawing lines like this, you'll be able to draw them like this. So in conclusion, when it comes to drawing hair, always think about the volume of the skull, try to divide the hair into multiple sections, and work on your line work. And that's it for this video. Hopefully that was helpful, and as always, if you'd like to support the channel, there's a Patreon as well as a YouTube memberships link in the description, and we also have a Discord server where you can get advice from me as well as some other artists, or you can just come hang out. But I think that's about it, so I guess I'll catch you all in the next video.